Being a sister seems kind of a high risk type of thing. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining me here at Then It Got Weird. Today, I'm bringing listener tales. Sorry for being a bit late this week. I've been seriously busy, I guess you could say, and just a bunch of things going on. And actually, I have a sleeping problem. And these days I have been sleeping like 2 hours or 3 hours at a time. And actually last night I slept 1 hour, and then I seriously just stayed up until like the next day. And I'm not even sleepy, so yeah. I guess I'm just stressed out. The seasons are changing. Here, yeah, I think I've mentioned before, but just in case for the people that don't know yet, I live in Japan, in the greater Tokyo area. And here there's something that and here in summertime there's this I guess mini season, you could call it. It's called the rainy season. It seriously just rains for days, and it's also kind of humid and hot. It's the weather in summertime is really bad here. I don't know where your country is. I remember also when I was back home in New Jersey, the summertime isn't that great either. Especially, I remember there were a few times, well, maybe 2 or 3 times, that because everyone was using up all the AC, all the air conditioning power in the tri-state area, and we were close to New York City, so they would just blast. I guess everybody was, of course, blasting their air conditioners because it was freaking hot. I could understand that, but then there was this big blackout. I'm talking about like 15 years ago or something like that. This year here in Tokyo is not that hot, but it's just gross and humid. And of course the weather is just changed suddenly. That is just dark and just ugly, and I get really affected by the weather. That is just, I guess, throwing me off. And then, of course life goes on, and the kids keep going to school, all that type of stuff. So I feel like I don't have time to record or edit. But I feel like I should just keep on delivering something every week. It just feels like it helps me to have some type of rhythm to something that I have started. I don't know, that type of stuff really matters to me for my own mental health. So anyway, as I said, this week I'm bringing few listener tales, and there are 2 that are short, on the short side, and they're pretty good. Thanks for the people that decided to share these with me, and here we go. This one is called The Tall Man in Black. I've always been a huge skeptic. Never seen a single paranormal thing in my life. I am a see to believe type of person. The most I believe in is karma. I've never formed myself to any religion, and when I tried, it just didn't work. I was around the age of 11. My sister was around 8 years old. We lived with our parents in a quaint little neighborhood. We walked to the bus stop every morning together for school. One morning in the middle of winter, we were walking to our bus stop. She started to scream, and she was hysterical. Nothing could calm her down. She kept screaming, "He's standing right there! He's right there!" We'd look around, and there was absolutely nothing. We were pretty spooked, obviously, but we went on with our day like normal, and later told our parents what had happened. We started to finally ask her to describe what she saw. She had mentioned it was an abnormally tall figure in all black, and you couldn't make any facial features out. So she wasn't sure who, or better yet, what it was. It will normally be seen off in the distance, in a window, or behind a tall tree. We were at a park one time after school, riding our bikes down a hill, and she had stopped in her tracks. It was extremely difficult to halt the bike down a grassy hill, but she stopped out of fear. She had seen it behind one of the pines in the distance. You know, the ones where the branches are far above the average adult's head. She said, "I see him right there. His head touches the branches." And my heart dropped. I couldn't see it, but I could sense how absolutely terrified she was, and it shook me to my core. We immediately turned our bikes around and headed straight home. Over time, it became normal. She started to have more frequent visits from this, tall figure, and we started getting really worried. We shook it off as a joke at first, but maybe she wasn't all there. But the way she described how she felt when she saw him gave us a hint of a bit of truth to her stories. Our grandfather had just passed away, so we figured that with losing him, it triggered something in her. At the time, we were attending church. We'd go for youth nights around after 7 during summer. We'd play outside and run around the church playing hide and seek or tag. One time we were outside running around as usual, and she had come up to me and said, "I just saw Jason." He was a good friend of our family who attended the church. Always wore a trench coat, always had his hair slicked back, pretty cool dude. We had come to the entrance of the church, ready to go home, and my sister had mentioned that she had seen him to our family members. They told us Jason was off on a mission in another country. They got worried and took us home immediately, just in case it was a predator or what we both imagined to be another visit from her shadowy friend. Here's a turning point to the story. She shared a bedroom with her grandmother. They kept the door open sometimes when they'd go to bed. Anyone else would think that's insane for this reason exactly, but she started to see figures in the house. One night, we had heard sirens across the street. We woke up and immediately got bombarded with phone calls from my mom. She couldn't get onto our street because police and ambulances had the road blocked off. My grandmother, my mother, and my sister and myself, we were all standing outside on our front yard to see that the windows had been shot out across the street. We found out the following morning the neighbor across the street from us had a home intruder, and they had shot the intruder's knees out. There was a huge gap in time where she didn't see the shadowy figure for years. Our mom, several years later, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer to the immune system. We had moved to a new house. The basement was always flooding with sewage. Eventually, we had sewage coming up our pipes, sinks, and tub, and with all the bacteria in the air, she had a very hard time fighting off infection. We almost lost her. Mom told us never to go into the basement. That eventually made my sister fabricate new horrors, most of which she wouldn't even describe to us, but what she kept seeing around this house was also scaring her. We eventually moved from the house, and I won't go into too much detail, but it was demolished shortly after. The last time that she ever saw the man in black was in a dream. She was around the age of 18. She said she was walking into our old basement, and she saw these little soot black creatures on the floor. She was carefully trying to not step on them. She finally got to the bottom of the basement, and in the corner was a little girl in white, crying. The girl had reached her hand out to my sister, and without any notice, she felt a very familiar presence behind her. She had turned around, and there was a tall, shadowy figure. He very quickly wrapped his arms around my sister and pulled her away from the girl. And then she woke up. To this day, I still get freaked out, and I get chills typing the story out and telling it to others. She came to the realization the day that she had the dream that maybe the shadowy figure was something she shouldn't have been afraid of, but maybe it was something trying to warn her, like a bad omen. She had first seen him after her grandfather died. before the intruder across the street, several times before our grandmother passed, a lot before our mother was diagnosed with cancer, and a lot when we lived in the house that damn near killed her. Outside of the possibility of the shadowy figure watching us, we feel that him being there might have been a warning that a predator was nearby. That might be a stretch, and again, I'm still skeptical to this day, but whenever I tell this story, it just sends chills down my spine, and I always catch myself looking over my shoulder, hoping nothing is there when I tell it. This story is called Farmer. My mother-in-law was a very funny and cool woman. She and my wife were really close, and sadly she passed away when our son was about 4 months old. So flash forward a few years, and we live in an old 1930s era craftsman house in Pasadena, California. Our son is about 3 at the time of the story. I was giving him a bath one night, and he starts looking over my shoulder, not at random stuff, but at something. A moment passes and he asks me why Grandma calls Mommy a funny name. Long pause. I asked him what he meant, thinking that he was talking about my mom. He then says, why does Grandma call Mom, and insert here the nickname that she had for my wife. I was really set back by this. My wife and I never used that nickname. It was just what her mom called her since she was a baby. I asked where he heard that. His reply was, the farmer told me. I asked him who the farmer was, and he replied, his friend. I told my wife this story later, and she's of course reduced to tears over the whole nickname thing. We both know there is no way for him to know this, and we just kind of marvel at it. Flash forward to the next weekend, and my son is playing in his room. My wife is at work, and I was back home. So I hear him start talking like he's having a conversation. And he's saying things like, yes, no, I don't know that. And then I can hear some laughing. I go into his room and ask him what he's doing, and he says, playing. I ask, with who? And he says, the farmer. At this point, I'm already thinking about the fucking Exorcist movie and Captain Howdy. It's a little unsettling. I ask him where the farmer is, and he says that he left when I came in. What the fuck, right? So my wife gets home, and I tell her this, and now she's just as weirded out as I am. We have no idea what to do, and figure that if it happens again, we'll do something. A few days later, in the middle of the night, we both overhear our son saying the following. Grandma says you and I can't be friends anymore. So the wife and I go check on him, both of us a little freaked, and we find that he's just sitting up in bed. I ask him if he's okay, and he says, yeah. Grandma says I can't play with the farmer anymore. He never mentioned the farmer again after this. Not ever. He's 13 years old now, and he doesn't remember any of it. We do. This one is called My Sister and I. When I was young, I'd say 8 or 11. My sister, who was 7 years older, would babysit me when my parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot, and my parents made her smoke outside, of course. So I'd follow her outside into the carport, which faced the street, and I would play around, annoy her, and such. One day, my sister notices a car at the end of the driveway, just sitting on the road. It's a white SUV, and I believe it's a mid-90s Bravado, I'm not sure. with the bike rack on top. It has the most tinted windows I have ever seen, and you could not see inside. It just sat there until we went inside. Then would drive to the end of the road and sit at the church parking lot and wait. Wait until she'd come out again for another smoke. And it would repeat this. Odd, but my sister is a brave lady and just kind of ignored it. That is, until the next day while my parents were out again and it showed up again. It would sit at the end of the driveway and just watch. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister. If I didn't go out, I'd watch from the front window and it would just sit there and watch my sister. She told my father, who was a sheriff deputy at the time, and he called the cops and made a complaint. They showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by and nothing. Then, one day, a good 9 months after this had all started, and maybe 4-ish since the last sighting, it was back. And it became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside doing her nasty habit, smoking thing, and sure enough, here it comes again. This time we were alone, as usual, and she decides she's had enough. She tells me to stay in the carport and that she's going to go confront them. She starts walking toward the SUV, and halfway down the driveway, she would later remark to us, I felt terror. Like I knew if I went any further, I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear. She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family car was in the shop for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck home for a night and had to get delivery, etc. While my parents are home, my sister goes outside to smoke. I go outside with her, and eventually the SUV shows up. She tells me to run inside and tell my father, and I do. My dad promptly gets his gun and starts briskly walking down the driveway with it in hand in the direction of the SUV, but not level toward it. The SUV floored it, went down the road and just peeled out into the nearby large highway. My dad, being a cop, he noted the year and the model and distinguishing features of the SUV. But the scariest thing, the license plate had been covered in duct tape. And we never saw it again. My sister kind of shrugs it off now. This story is called The Elderly Couple. It's a short one. My sister and I were playing outside when we were younger, and an elderly couple was walking by our yard. Our yard had a cemetery in the back, so it was quite a common local attraction for tourists, as this house was built in the 1800s. And most of the graves were from children who died back then from the flu, etc. Much more common than now. People had short lifespans, right? There are some creepy stories from that place, but nothing lives up to what happened all those years ago. Playing outside, and this old couple kept pestering my sister about what her name was as they approached us and they got closer. We were just little kids and we got terribly scared, of course, so we just ran inside our house and told our mom about what had happened. The following week, though, I heard a story on the news about an elderly couple approaching a teenage girl, kidnapping her and raping her. And it was the same couple that had approached my sister and I. I still get creeped out by that, and probably forever will. This next one is called my new neighbors. Some stories still stick with me. I grew up in a house on Long Island in the town of Brentwood. It was a quiet town for its location. My dad worked as a taxi driver at the time, which meant he would usually end up coming home early in the morning, and I would greet him then. So it's Sunday, and I'm watching Saturday morning cartoons, and my dad comes in, and I run to say hello. My mom hears us from the bedroom, and she says, "Hello, honey, don't go in the pool, it's not ready yet." Me and my dad think that it's weird because it's 6 a.m. and we weren't going into the pool, right? But we just brush it off, and he goes on to tell me his usual stories of the crazies that he picked up through the night. We then realized it was Saturday, and my mom was at work, and it was only me and him in the house. But the voice sounded just like my mom. So fast forward a couple of weeks, we had just recently moved into the house, and my new neighbors come over to welcome us to town. It was the two mothers, two sons, one my age and one a little older in 10th grade, two little girls, one blonde-haired little girl and a shy brunette that didn't talk. And we get to play some soccer and such. However, the little brunette girl is suddenly nowhere to be found. Now, the curious little kid I ran around the property, and I find her playing in the woods. A dangerous area for little kids to be exploring, right? She asks me to come play tag, but I declined, wanting to get everyone in on the game. The reactions of everyone as I asked for them to join us was puzzling, along with a response from the mom. "We only have one daughter." Turns out a small brown-haired girl drowned in the pool 10 years ago, and the mother soon passed from a heart attack after that. The following 5 to 6 years in this place were pretty terrifying. I have so many stories from this house, so many to tell that I will not forget. Hey guys, thanks for listening. As I always say, keep subscribing as my little podcast keeps gaining momentum. I'm always so thankful to you guys, and it makes me so happy to reach out to you. So please follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active, and I post things about my daily life, so that might be fun for you. And also, I'm on YouTube. I upload the audio there because it turns out that some people don't like to download an app to listen to podcasts, so I'm doing that. Any suggestions, please drop me a line and write to me at igotweird.podcast@gmail.com. My Instagram is igotweird.podcast. Sorry to drop this in, but I'm accepting donations to help cover costing and other podcast costs. If you wish to chip in, I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/itgotweirdpod. One more time, itgotweirdpod, POD. And I'm also on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/itgotweirdpodcast. That's just a little bit. That's like $1 or something like that, and I can get a coffee. That's all for this episode. I'm recording some other stuff. I think it's gonna be on a bit more of a lighter, fun side. If you like those, I uploaded some where I had a guest. My guest was my sister Carol, and then my friend Sarah. So I had pretty good amount of downloads, so I'm guessing that they were kind of fun to listen to. So it's good to change it up a bit. So this week, thank you for sitting around my campfire. And what I have learned, I guess, is that having a sister seems kind of a high-risk type of thing. I don't know, it seems to increase the chances of something creepy happening. Thankfully, that's not my experience that I remember. I'll have to ask my sister. Thanks for dropping by. Good night, and campfire